Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're swapping our wetsuits for, I guess, comfy mental space as we kind of explore the world of Ajahn Brahm.
Hmm.
You might know him as the theoretical physicist turned Buddhist monk,
Right.
or maybe you've just heard some of his really insightful and often very funny stories.
Yeah, he's a great storyteller.
We'll be diving deep into his book, Opening the Door of Your Heart,
Yes.
which is packed with like practical wisdom on navigating kind of the ups and downs of life and finding a greater sense of peace.
It's a good one. Ajahn Brahm's teachings really resonate, I think, because he so masterfully bridges that gap between, ancient wisdom and our modern lives.
Yeah.
It's like he's giving us a toolkit,
Mm-hmm.
to build inner peace, like one anecdote at a time.
Totally. And like any good toolkit, we've got to start with the basics, right?
Yep.
Yeah. One of the first concepts that really resonated with me was his story about the two bad bricks.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how we can get so fixated on the flaws, the imperfections,
Yeah.
those metaphorical bad bricks in an otherwise, perfectly fine wall?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a common human experience, I think. We tend to zoom in on what's wrong, what's missing, rather than appreciating kind of the abundance of good that's right in front of us.
Right.
And Ajahn Brahm reminds us that those bad bricks are often like dwarfed by the vast number of good bricks that actually make up the wall
Right.
or the relationship or even like ourselves.
Totally. It's about shifting that perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love the story he tells about the builder who, overhearing this whole two bad bricks metaphor, leans in and says, we call those original features.
Right, right.
It's about choosing to see those imperfections not as flaws, but as unique characteristics that give something character.
Exactly. It's like reframing, and this whole focus on imperfection. It reminds me of another story from the book, the tale of the meticulous gardening monk. So this monk, he painstakingly crafts this perfect garden. And then an older, wiser monk comes along and with a playful smile remarks, "Well done, your garden is almost perfect."
Oh.
Do you imagine that younger monk's, frustration?
Oh, I can only imagine all that work, striving for absolute perfection, only to have it labeled as almost.
Yeah.
But isn't that where the real learning kind of begins?
Yeah.
What can we take away from that interaction?
I think this story just so beautifully highlights the Buddhist perspective on finding peace.
Mm.
It's not about achieving some unattainable standard of perfection,
Right.
which, let's be honest, can be pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
It's about, learning to find contentment, to appreciate what is rather than agonizing over what's not.
So instead of chasing after that elusive idea of perfect,
Right.
we can kind of embrace the beauty of almost perfect,
Yeah,
which, let's face it, is a lot more attainable.
absolutely. And I think, think about it. How often have you held yourself back from trying something new or from sharing your work or from simply being yourself
Oh, yeah.
because you were afraid it wouldn't be perfect?
Ooh, all the time. I can be my own worst critic, for sure. So how do we break free from that cycle, from that fear of not measuring up?
Well, Ajahn Brahm would say it starts with, recognizing those good bricks.
Yeah.
What are the positive qualities, the strengths, the values that make you who you are? It's about shifting your focus from what you lack to what you already possess.
It's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Yeah.
We get so caught up comparing ourselves to others, striving for some external ideal that we forget to appreciate our own unique, almost perfect selves. And often those imperfections, those quirks are what make us interesting.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about embracing those authentic selves, imperfections and all. And speaking of embracing the imperfect, Ajahn Brahm has some really insightful and often humorous advice on, dealing with those curveballs that life throws our way.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Because let's be real, we can't always meditate our way out of a sticky situation.
you can't meditate your way out of everything. Life gets messy.
Life gets messy, exactly.
Life gets messy. So he shares this rather timely anecdote about the SARS outbreak in Singapore.
Okay.
Picture this. He's scheduled to give this series of talks just as the crisis hits.
Yeah.
Fear is rampant.
Right.
Schools are closing. People are avoiding gatherings like the plague, pun intended.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talking about pressure. I can only imagine the internal debate
Right,
to speak or not to speak.
right. Should we cancel? Should we not cancel?
Yeah.
So he chose to kind of face the fear head on, but not in a reckless way.
Yeah.
When asked if they should cancel the talks, he responded with a question that I thought was so interesting, rooted in, like, wisdom, but also probability. He pointed out that at that time, there were 99 confirmed cases in a city of 4 million.
Wow.
The odds of anyone contracting SARS at the talks were incredibly slim. He said that means that 3,999,901 Singaporeans haven't got SARS. Let's go ahead.
That's classic Ajahn Brahm finding the humor, right? Even in the midst of, like, a crisis.
Hiding that humor.
But it's also, like, a powerful reminder that fear often kind of distorts our perception of reality.
Exactly. Fear tends to, like, magnify the negative, the what-ifs, while blinding us to the, like, entirely possible positive outcomes.
Yeah.
It's like wearing those glasses that just make everything look dark and gloomy.
Yeah.
Even on a sunny day.
We've all been there, right? Like stuck in that mental loop of just worst case scenarios.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So how do we break free from those like fear-driven thought patterns?
Well, Ajahn Brahm suggests a simple, yet I think really profound practice. Instead of kind of dwelling on what you're afraid of, he says, ask yourself, what's the opposite of this fear? What could go right?
It's like flipping the script.
Yeah.
Shifting our focus from what we're like trying to avoid to what we might be like moving towards.
Yeah, and I think that's powerful. And if that feels too difficult, he says sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just like acknowledge, you know what, my future is uncertain. And there's a strange freedom in that acceptance.
Okay.
In releasing that need to control everything.
That resonates for sure. It's like that saying, worrying is like paying interest on a debt you may not owe.
Yes, exactly.
But let's be honest, it's like easier said than done, right? Fear can be a powerful, powerful motivator.
It is.
Even when it's based on kind of distorted thinking.
Absolutely. It's a practice.
Yeah.
You know, it's a continuous process of kind of recognizing those fear-based thoughts and consciously choosing a different perspective. It's like building a muscle.
Right.
The more we exercise that shifting perspective muscle, the stronger it becomes.
I like that. So we've talked about guilt and perfectionism and fear, but what about anger? That like fiery emotion can be a really tough one to tame. Does Ajahn Brahm have any like tips for navigating that particular minefield?
He does. And it involves a rather memorable character. He calls it the anger-eating demon.
Okay.
So imagine this. A huge, smelly, foul-mouthed demon plops itself right in the middle of a king's throne room. Chaos erupts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The palace staff, they try everything to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yelling at it, threatening it, even like attacking it with swords.
Oh, I bet that went well. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Exactly.
Oh.
So what's the solution? How do you deal with an anger-eating demon?
Yeah.
You starve it with kindness.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's it. Every kind word, every act of compassion shrinks that demon, making it less smelly, less intimidating, until eventually, poof, it vanishes.
Okay, that's a powerful image. But like, how does that translate to our everyday lives? We're not exactly like facing down demons on a regular basis.
Well, maybe not literal demons.
Yeah.
But we all encounter situations that trigger anger or frustration or even rage. You know, it could be a frustrating commute or a disagreement with a loved one or even just a bad day at the office. The key is to recognize that anger, like that demon, thrives on negativity. The more we indulge it, the stronger it becomes, and the more damage it can inflict on ourselves and our relationships.
It's so easy to get caught in that cycle, though, right? To react, like, defensively.
Oh, it is.
It's like meet anger with anger. So how do we break free from that reactive pattern?
Well, one of the most powerful things we can do, and Ajahn Brahm really emphasizes this, is to ask ourselves a simple question before reacting. What good will anger do in this situation?
That is such a powerful question.
It is.
Because often the answer is absolutely nothing. In fact, anger often makes things worse.
Precisely. And sometimes the wisest, most courageous response is to simply step back, take a breath, and choose a different path.
Yeah.
You know, it might be responding with kindness or seeking to understand the other person's perspective or simply walking away from a situation that's escalating. It's about recognizing that we always have a choice in how we respond, even when it feels like our buttons are being pushed.
Yeah. This reminds me of the story Ajahn Brahm shares about the couple sailing across the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, yes.
And their engine dies in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And they're stuck in this tiny, hot engine room trying to, like, fix it. And, of course, tensions rise, frustrations boil over, and one of the men, in a fit of rage, decides he's had enough. he is leaving.
Oh, that story. Yeah, it perfectly illustrates the absurdity of anger in a situation where there's literally no escape.
Right. He, like, storms up to the deck, bags packed, ready to make a grand exit, only to be met with, well, endless ocean in every direction.
The image of him standing there, fuming with nowhere to go, I mean, it's priceless.
Right.
But it's also, like, a powerful reminder that sometimes anger just blinds us to reality.
His poor wife. Although I have to admit, the image of her watching him stomp back down to the cabin, defeated, makes me chuckle.
Right? It's a funny story, but it highlights a profound truth. Sometimes the only way forward is to let go of the anger, to acknowledge the reality of the situation, and to work together to find a solution.
It's about choosing, like, collaboration over conflict.
Yeah.
Understanding over blame.
Exactly.
It's not always easy, but as Ajahn Brahm so skillfully reminds us, it's always a choice.
It is a choice.
Yeah.
Always.
You know, it's funny how anger can sometimes make us feel like we're trapped in, like, a tiny engine room with, like, no way out.
Right.
But as Ajahn Brahm's stories kind of remind us, often the key to freedom is, shifting our perspective, finding that space within ourselves to, like, choose a different response.
Beautifully put. And speaking of freedom, Ajahn Brahm connects it directly to contentment. He uses this this powerful analogy about, prioritizing happiness.
Yeah.
Imagining a jar that represents our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We have, like, big rocks for things like, meaningful work and loving relationships and personal growth.
Right.
And then we have, like, pebbles and sand
Yeah.
for all those smaller, less important, tasks and distractions.
It's so easy to let those pebbles and sand, like, fill up our jars first.
Oh, absolutely.
Leaving little to no room for the big, important rocks.
Indeed. And we convince ourselves that, we'll focus on those big rocks later once all the smaller stuff is out of the way.
Yeah.
But Ajahn Brahm would argue that if we don't prioritize those big rocks,
Right.
those things that bring us, like, genuine joy and fulfillment, they'll always get pushed aside.
It's like that classic story of the Mexican fisherman and the American businessman, right?
Exactly.
The businessman, so obsessed with achieving more, can't fathom why the fisherman is content with a simple life of fishing and spending time with his family.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that happiness isn't something we find at the end of some long road. It's about choosing to find joy in the present moment.
Yeah.
In the enoughness of what we already have.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that those precious stones of happiness are often found, not in grand achievements,
Right.
but in the, like, simple pleasures of life. A shared meal, a walk in nature, a moment of connection with a loved one.
And it requires, like, a conscious effort, doesn't it?
It does.
To cultivate, like, gratitude, to savor those moments, to choose contentment over that constant striving for more. It's a practice.
Yes.
It's a way of being rather than a destination we arrive at.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay.
Ajahn Brahm often talks about the importance of silence in cultivating wisdom.
Right.
And not just the absence of noise,
Yeah.
right? But that inner stillness where we can truly hear our own inner voice, our own intuition.
Oh, I completely agree. It's so easy to get caught up in the constant chatter of our minds, right?
Yes.
That the endless to-do lists,
Yeah.
the worries and anxieties that, like, just swirl around. It's in those moments of quiet,
Yeah.
of simply being present, that like true clarity often kind of emerges.
He tells this funny story about a man who flees to the city after finding the sound of a young boy practicing the violin in his peaceful mountain valley, like unbearable.
Oh, wow.
He vows to never listen to music again until, of course, he hears an old woman playing a beautiful sonata on, what else? A violin.
Wow.
It's this reminder that sometimes what we resist, what we judge,
Yeah.
so harshly,
Right.
can actually be a source of beauty and wisdom if we approach it with an open mind and heart.
That's a great reminder to, like, check ourselves when we
Yeah.
find ourselves, shutting down or pushing away something simply because it's unfamiliar or challenging. And this idea of silence and listening, it reminds me of another story Ajahn Brahm shares, the one about the king and the long-winded minister.
Ah, yes, the minister who just wouldn't stop talking.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What did the king finally do?
So, well, after realizing that, like, more subtle hints weren't getting through,
Right.
he had a, like, curtain installed in the court with a small hole in it.
Okay.
The next time the minister started his, endless monologue,
Yeah.
someone behind the curtain started tossing pebbles through the hole, aiming for the minister's open mouth.
I can only imagine the minister's surprise.
I
Did
know.
that stop him?
Not at first, determined to finish his point.
Oh, no.
He swallowed those pebbles right down.
Oh, my goodness.
It wasn't until the king switched out the pebbles for laxative-inducing berries that the minister finally got the message.
Ouch. That's a drastic way to enforce a listening break.
I know, right? It's a funny story, albeit a bit extreme. But it highlights the importance of kind of balance, doesn't it?
It does.
Between, speaking and listening,
Yeah.
between expressing ourselves and being receptive to what others have to say. Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is simply close our mouths and open our ears.
Yes.
And our minds.
And to your point about finding that inner stillness, Ajahn Brahm also emphasizes that, just like we train our bodies through physical exercise,
Right.
we can train our minds through meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's about, strengthening that muscle of awareness,
Right.
of noticing our thoughts and emotions without judgment.
It's a practice, and like any practice, it requires patience and consistency and a good dose of self-compassion. We're not striving for some unrealistic state of perfection, but rather cultivating a sense of presence, of being more fully engaged in our lives.
Beautifully said. And as we kind of begin to wrap up our deep dive into Ajahn Brahm's Opening the Door of Your Heart, what are some of the key takeaways that you'll be carrying with you?
Well, for me, it's that reminder to focus on those good bricks, to embrace the almost perfect, and to approach life's challenges with a bit more humor and a lot more kindness.
Yes.
It's about recognizing that true happiness isn't something we chase, but something we cultivate.
Yeah.
Moment by moment, through conscious choices and a willingness to shift our perspective.
Those are wonderful takeaways.
Thank
And as we leave our listeners to ponder their own insights from this deep dive, Ajahn Brahm leaves us with, I think, a final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If freedom is found in contentment, where do you feel most imprisoned in your own life?
Ooh, that is a good one.
It is.
And perhaps the answer lies not in some drastic change or external achievement,
Right.
but in those small daily choices we make.
Yes.
To embrace our almost perfect selves, to face our fears with courage and compassion, and to cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for the good that already surrounds us.
Indeed. So until next time, dear listeners, may you find joy in the almost perfect.
Yes.
And freedom in the practice of contentment.